Because there are two choices. There's not 5 or 6 different options in the next election. There's going to be 2. Because it's the Liberals, it's the NDP, it's the Bloc, and it's the Green Party that think the carbon tax is doing wonders. It's when you tax the farmer that grows the food, you tax the trucker that ships the food, you tax the stores that sell the food with the carbon tax. Nothing contributes to inflation. It all is just made up in Canadians' heads. Canadians know better, and that's why they are desperately, desperately avoiding a carbon tax election. It is the leader's record of the NDP on Labour that is absolutely hypocritical. We go time and time again. He said, I want to read a quote just from about 1 month ago. He said, quote, if there is ever any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, speaking to union members on November the 12th last month, we're going to vote no. I can tell you right now we'll vote no. Whether that vote is a confidence vote or not, whether that triggers an election or not, I'm telling the Prime Minister and the Liberals right now, you're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of workers. Never. He said that last month. Our motion calls that out today. It is not a game to vote for non-confidence and to have an election and to say enough of this, Prime Minister. What is political games is voting against this, the NDP voting against their own words and they're not matching their actions with the rhetoric they've said for the last while. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to wrap up today, and I want to say to Canadians, my part of Eastern Ontario across this country, things are not good right now. The numbers and the stats we are showing are difficult to hear. We have to spend a lot of time talking about doubling of housing, food inflation, food bank use, drug overdose deaths. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to provide a message of hope. It was not this bad before the NDP and Liberals came in, and it will not be that bad after we give them the boot. I'm thinking today in this motion, it's not just about the NDP. It's about the 30-something-year-old that's stuck in their parents' basement. We're going to build new homes by axing the GST on new home sales under $1 million. For the 47,000 Canadians that have lost their life to drug overdoses, Mr. Speaker, treatment and recovery, not the legalization of hard drugs. We're going to give a country that we knew, restore the Canada we know and love, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the NDP to get with the program, call an election, back up their words. Let's have Canadians finally have their say.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire, the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Leader of the Opposition was speaking moments ago, he said Liberals, with the help of the NDP, have overpowered the rights of workers. Can the member explain what he meant by that?
Member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
It is right exactly, Mr. Speaker, in the motion. The NDP is calling out the Liberal failure, the Liberal Minister of Labour, for what he has done when it comes to not respecting the right of union workers to strike. It is that minister and that Liberal government that's answered the question that took away their right to collective bargaining. They talk a big game and their actions speak completely different. It's time now for the NDP. If they're going to call the Liberals out and say how bad it is time to respect union workers. It's time to respect the collective bargaining process. It's time for the NDP to back their words up with action. The tough rhetoric out of the microphone and in question period, it's time to do that when it comes to a vote and it comes to a carbon tax election.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, as a new member of Parliament, I wasn't part of the Confidence and Supply Agreement, but I don't want to be a part of a government that doesn't support workers in this country. I walked the picket lines many times in my life, specifically with the workers of Teamsters. I watched my dad fight for the rights of brothers and sisters. I have listened to my brother talk about the safety issues his co-workers are facing every day on the job. I don't support the back to work legislation that this Liberal government forced. But what will the Conservatives do to support workers in this country? And I don't mean in words, I mean in action.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
Well, I want to welcome that new member to the chamber. And remember, it was her during that by-election campaign alongside her leader that said they no longer supported the carbon tax. What are we doing to support workers in this country? Going to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Union workers in this country are using food banks at a record level. They are living in their parents' basement because they can't afford a new home at a time we need to build more homes. We're building less. And here's the thing about the NDP again. Oh, we don't support the government. She wasn't here when the Supply and Confidence Agreement was written. But guess what? She's going to be voting on this motion. If she is so upset about all the things that she just mentioned, take it to Canadians. Make the pitch. Make the case. The NDP won't do that because they know that Canadians are going to give them the boot, not a reward.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the speech that my colleague from Ontario just gave. And when it comes to calling out the leader of the fourth party in this place, the leader of the NDP, it truly is one of these examples where the talk comes to action. So I'm wondering if my colleague from Ontario could expand a little bit on how the vote that will take place in just a few days is an opportunity for the fourth party to decide whether or not they're all talk or whether or not they're willing to take action and actually put these ideas to the test before Canadians.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
I appreciate my colleague's reminder to Canadians of the question that the NDP is going to be voting on. We are putting their own words. I didn't make anything up. I'm not putting even my words. It's not even a Conservative words in the Opposition Day motion. We are being nonpartisan and letting the NDP finally let that stress relief out. If they have ripped up their supply and confidence coalition agreement, if the Liberals are too weak and too selfish and too beholden, and if the Liberal governments always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure unions have no power, they should support their own words. Let Canadians say in an election, it's that simple. What are they scared of?
Questions and comments.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech, but I'm a bit perplexed and confused today. We all remember the time when, for electoralist reasons, the NDP ripped up its agreement. They said they no longer had confidence in the government, but continued to support the government. On the other hand, the Conservatives for a long time have been saying that they no longer have confidence in the government. We've been clear about it. We had our 2 opposition days for seniors and also for supply management, and the Conservatives said they would support us on that one at some point. But the Conservatives have been making everything stall in this House, so we've not been able to table a non-confidence motion. So can we finally have an election?
Dundas South Glengarry.
The Bloc Liberal coalition with the NDP is alive and well. She's saying the House has been paralyzed by anything but the Liberals holding back on $400 million Green Slush Fund documents to go to the RCMP. If the Bloc, they try to negotiate with the Liberals, got nowhere, it's their credibility that's shot, no one else's.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be splitting my time. Perhaps the member for King's Hants will even be nice enough to finish my speech. Mais je suis honoré de prendre la parole aujourd'hui.
I'm honoured to rise today to discuss our government's strong commitment to equity and equality for Canadian workers. But the Conservative leader is very hypocritical, and he wants to put an end to the union movement in Canada. The member for Carleton tried to wax poetic, talking about workers today, but it's not true. The only workers' right he supports is the right that Canadians have to work for less. I'm honoured to be able to talk about the progress that we've made to help Canadian workers and their families have a more fair future.
He now uses them as unwilling props in his latest parliamentary temper tantrum. Unreal. Let me tell you what the member for Carleton proudly supported. 2 anti-union bills, C-377 and C-525, which sought to make it harder for workers to organize and undermine the ability of unions to fight for their members. We repealed those bills, Mr. Speaker. Yes. The Conservative Party policy declaration, today, as it exists, page 6, states that the Conservative Party of Canada supports right-to-work legislation to allow optional union membership, unquote. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, Liberals have been there for workers from day one. On this side of the House, we stand on our record, not empty slogans. Hear, hear. So we've made sure that federally regulated employees have had access to up to 10 paid sick days per year. That helps nearly 1 million Canadians. A growing share of Canada's workforce is now comprised of gig workers. Gig work can offer many benefits, such as flexibility and more freedom at work. However, these kinds of work arrangements can also deprive workers of the rights, protections, and entitlements they deserve. So on June 20th, 2024, we brought legislation into force to better protect gig workers in federally regulated industries against misclassification. Last year, we announced 5 new clean tech tax credits, We're investing $93 billion over the next decade in tax credits for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, clean technology adoption, clean technology manufacturing, clean hydrogen, clean electricity, and EV supply chains. But, Mr. Speaker, to get the full extent and benefit of 4 of those 5 tax credits, companies have to hire union workers or pay workers a prevailing union wage and create apprenticeships. Mr. Speaker, after question period and after the votes today, we'll have the opportunity, me or my colleague from King's Hands, to go into deep detail about the positive, progressive record of this government for unions and for workers. We won't be talking about things like the Conservative leader talks about, that union contracts that pay workers a decent wage result in, quote, pointless, quote, unnecessary inflation of costs, that non-union firms with lower wages are good for competition. We won't be talking about those things. The Conservative leader is pretending. It's fake, Mr. Speaker, and we'll have more to say later. Thank you very much.
There you go.
The Honourable Minister will have 6 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock. Now we move to statements by members. Déclaration de député. L'honorable
The Honourable Member
from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will mark 35 years since the murder of 14 women in an engineering class at Polytechnique Montréal simply because they were women. I wish I could say that this misogynistic violence was an outlier, yet this year alone, 168 women and girls across the country have already been killed in femicides. In the face of this gender-based violent epidemic, the frontline work being done by organizations including those in my community like Women's Crisis Services, the Sexual Assault Support Center of Waterloo Region, the Coalition of Muslim Women, and YWKW are all the more important. My sincere thanks to them. For those in Waterloo Region looking to come together for the National Day of Remembrance and Action Against Gender-Based Violence, to remember the victims of the Polytechnique Massacre and all those we've lost since, CFUW will be hosting a vigil at 5:30 tomorrow night at St. Columba Anglican Church. I hope to see you there.
The Honourable Member from Richmond Centre, for Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, since elected, I've been working with my colleague from Steveston, Richmond East, to address our housing priority in the City of Richmond. As a result, early this January, our Liberal government invested $35.9 million through the Housing Accelerator Fund for Richmond to build more homes faster. This important funding has enabled City of Richmond to approve over 1,166 new housing permits by August, exceeding Richmond's target of 1,125 homes 4 months ahead of schedule. The Conservative leader claimed that, and I quote, municipal politicians are incompetent, greedy, and money hungry. Mr. Speaker, let the facts speak for themselves. And let us not forget that when the Conservative leader was the housing minister, he helped build 0 apartment, 0 cooperative housing, and 6 affordable units across Canada. Our Liberal government will continue to work with municipalities to turn ambition into action. Together, we will deliver real and lasting progress for my community of Richmond Centre and communities across Canada.
Bravo.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bow River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, athletes from Team Canada are in Ottawa to be recognized for their achievements at the 2024 Olympics and Paralympic Games. I would like to recognize 3 exceptional athletes from the Bow River riding. Jessica Sevick from Strathmore, a 2-time Olympian in rowing, switching from doubles to women's 8, culminating in a successful Olympics winning silver this year. Kira Wardley of Vulcan, also a 2-time Olympian, with the women's rugby sevens team in 2019 and follow-up at the Paris Olympics, winning silver 4 years later. Jennifer Oakes of Brooks, 3-time Paralympian with Canada's women's sitting volleyball team since 2015, Canada's best server in 2020, and winning the bronze medal in this year's Paralympics. These 3 extraordinary women exemplify Olympic spirit, doing Canada proud every time they wear the maple leaf. Congratulations on bringing it home.
Yeah. Great job. Great job.
Honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Orléans. Mr. Speaker, it is of gratitude and admiration that I would like to thank Mr. Robert Rainboth of the Ottawa Firefighters Association for organising the Orleans Parade of Lights for the past 27 years. His vision and his leadership have both transformed this event into a true symbol of joy and magic in Orleans. Every year, he has brought a twinkle to the eyes of the young and the old alike and offered the community a unique moment of togetherness and celebration, with record crowds of 150,000 people lining St. Joseph's Boulevard. Organising a parade with 75 floats for nearly 3 decades is no easy task, but he accomplished it with brio and determination. Although the 30th of November was his last parade, Robert created much more than just an event, a tradition that year after year helps to make Orleans shine. Thank you so much for these 27 years, Robert. The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, in 2024, the Boucherville Rowing Club celebrates its 50th year. Since it was founded in 1974, the club has been able to take advantage of Boucherville's exceptional geographical location facing the majestic St. Lawrence River. Over the years, many of its athletes have been selected for our national teams, and some have even made it to the Olympics. The rowing club enables its members to develop great values such as mutual aid, team spirit, the culture of effort, surpassing oneself, and good lifestyle habits. There's literally a family atmosphere there, and I have to say that it's a beautiful sight to behold. I'd like to offer my congratulations to its head, Julie Dermine, and its head coach, Christian Hardy Cardinal. Thank you to everyone who has been involved in this organisation over the past half-century of adventures. It's clear that you're all rowing together towards excellence.
The Honourable Member for Brampton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I received a message from a small business owner in our community. He said, quote, "Thank you, MP Shafkat Ali and Liberal leadership. Our small business received Canada Carbon Rebate today. It came in unexpectedly and at the right time." End quote. Great to see that Canada Carbon Rebate for small and medium-sized businesses is making a real difference. $2.5 billion of the proceeds from the price on pollution is going back to about 600,000 small businesses. Our government is committed to making life more affordable for Canadians while protecting our environment and helping small and medium-sized businesses to grow, innovate, and stay competitive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Yellowhead.
Alberta is the beating heart of Canada. It's where farmers, truckers, and energy workers rise before the sun, roll up their sleeves, and build this country's prosperity. It's where hard work, freedom, and community aren't just values, they're a way of life. But the NDP Liberal government is hell-bent on crushing Alberta. They continue to hike the carbon tax, forcing families to choose between heating and eating. They're capping oil and gas, killing the jobs that built this country, and leaving towns struggling to survive. They don't respect Alberta, its people, or what we stand for. But, Mr. Speaker, Albertans don't quit. We don't break, we work harder, stand taller, and keep moving forward. The solution is clear: a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the carbon tax, scrap the cap, and restore hope and prosperity to Alberta. Together, we'll bring home the Canada we know and love. Strong, proud, and free.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to celebrate an incredible milestone for a small but mighty voice in Dartmouth, the North Dartmouth Echo. 20 years ago, this non-profit newspaper was born out of a single but powerful vision: to amplify the good news in the community, news that too often went unheard. Since then, the Echo has become a beacon of positivity, staffed entirely by dedicated volunteers, now an all-woman team, who publish 5 inspiring issues a year. This is more than a newspaper, Mr. Speaker. It's the heartbeat of a community. The Echo shares the triumphs of local schools, small businesses, nonprofits, and everyday residents. It connects, celebrates, and uplifts North Dartmouth. I want to give a quick recognition to Sylvia Anthony, a co-founder whose tireless efforts, selling ads, gathering stories, and even delivering the newspaper herself keep this incredible initiative alive. As the Echo publishes its December issue, let's all celebrate this 20-year legacy of community spirit and good news. Here's to another 20 years of making North Dartmouth proud.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Outremont. 35 years since the massacre at the École Polytechnique, like every year, I will be joining my community on Mount Royal to commemorate and pay tribute to the 14 women whose lives were stolen simply because they were women. The advocacy of survivors like Nathalie Provost and the members of Police Soutien continues to inspire and encourage us to strengthen gun control in Canada. And especially on a day like today, I would like to thank them, Police Soutien, in this House for their courage.
To fighting gun violence. We've taken historic steps to ban assault weapons like the one used in the femicide at Polytechnique, and we are working tirelessly to curb the scourge of gender-based violence. 14 young women were taken from us 35 years ago. We will never forget them. We owe it to them and to all victims of gun violence to continue this fight.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, Canada now has the dubious distinction of having a violent crime rate even higher than the United States. Just yesterday, 2 people were wounded in a stabbing attack in Vancouver. It's like Canadians have become numb to these stories. It's like they almost expect them day to day. Liberals have presided over a 92% increase in gang-related murders since they took office. Child sexual abuse and exploitation material offences are up 52% since just last year. And police chiefs are calling out the Prime Minister for allowing extremely violent repeat offenders out on bail. But it's not just about the numbers, Mr. Speaker. On the side of each crime statistic is a victim whose life has been changed forever. These people usually remain nameless, voiceless, and faceless. This is the Prime Minister's track record. This is why we need an election now. And I can promise this. Unlike the Prime Minister, a Conservative government will fight for the nameless, voiceless, and faceless.
Well done.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, inflation is cooling and interest rates are dropping, but not all Canadians are feeling the relief quite yet. So that's why our government is putting a little bit more money back into the pockets of Canadians to help them afford the things they need and save up for the things that they want. The vote passed last week, and that means this season Canadians will not pay GST on things that are holiday essentials for many of us, like prepared meals, kids' clothes, and Christmas trees. Oddly, though, one member in this House did not want to give Canadians a tax break this holiday. The leader of the opposition. The same guy who loves to talk about axing taxes and who even ran on giving Canadians a GST holiday in the last election. This is the time of giving and caring, Speaker. Maybe the opposition leader's heart is just 2 sizes too small.
You're so funny. The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
The opposition leader has offered the finance minister 2 hours to present the fall economic statement on Monday. The minister's response was to reject the offer to provide an update that would take no more than a minute. It's absurd that Canadians are in the dark about how dire the fiscal situation is in this country. The NDP Liberal Costly Coalition has created inflationary deficits that are hurting Canadians at the grocery store, the gas pumps, and in their monthly heating bills. Canadians are trying to manage household budgets while this government's inflationary deficits are costing every Canadian as the deficits blow up uncontrollably. Canadians were promised a $40 billion deficit cap in the spring budget. budget. So what is the real deficit number, and why won't the finance minister take up the offer by the opposition leader to tell Canadians the truth in the People's House? By hiding the truth, the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister are proving once again that they cannot be redeemed at this point, and they must be replaced by a common-sense Conservative government who will fix the budget. Mr. Speaker, a carbon tax election can't come soon enough.
Hear, hear, hear.
The honourable member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government can be summed up by two principles: pensions and power. The leader of the NDP will continue to vote pro-confidence in this government so he can receive his pension. It's the perfect partnership. The Prime Minister gets the power and the NDP get their pensions. More hypocrisy from the Maserati Marxist, champagne socialist, jet-setting, high-carbon coalition that has broken our economy, doubled our housing cost, and crippled our natural resource, agriculture, and transport sectors. They brought in back-breaking regulations and taxations that have led to record numbers at our food banks and sky-high violent crime. The NDP do their grandiose announcements about breaking up with their Liberal partners, but when push comes to shove, they continue to prop up the very government that has gotten us into the mess. When will the leader of the NDP finally stop the talk, take some action, and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide between the carbon tax coalition and a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, stop the crime, fix the budget?
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Order. Order, please. I know that colleagues would like to listen to all members' declarations. I'll ask them, please, to not take the floor. The honourable member for Halifax West.
Thank you. Silent night, holiday bright. Mr. Speaker, we did what's right. With inflation still hard to bear, we voted for real relief to show we care. GST, HST off essential needs, we're helping families to succeed. Silent night, not all is right. The leader of the opposition refused this light. The leader who vowed to axe the tax turned his back when time to act. Broken promises Canadians see, a leader that's out of harmony. Silent night, the question is clear. Why deny hope this time of year? Canadians deserve to know why tax relief was met with no. This Christmas season, from my family to yours, may joy and cheer bring warmth and peace for the year. Thank you.
So glad that's over.
The honourable member for Order. The honourable member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, after months of investigation, data gathering, testimony analysis of the facts, Amnesty International has come to the conclusion that genocide is taking place against Palestinians in Gaza. After bombardments against civilian populations that have left more than 52,000 dead, more than 100,000 wounded, 2 million displaced in an area from which they cannot flee, and a humanitarian crisis in which hunger is being used as a weapon of war, this conclusion will come as no surprise to anyone. At least no one with an iota of compassion. Knowing this, Canada is violating its own legal obligations under the Genocide Prevention Treaty. Despite its promises, the Liberal government continues to authorise arms sales to the Netanyahu regime. In so doing, the Liberals risk being complicit in a genocide that is taking place before our very eyes. That is the reason for which the Liberal government must sanction the Netanyahu regime, stop arms sales, and officially recognise the Palestinian state.
L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Christmas is just around the corner, as we've seen today, not because we're buried by a beautiful sheet of snow, but because it's a traditional Grande Guignolée des Médias. To launch this 24th edition, volunteers will be collecting funds today at more than 400 collection points across Quebec, including Trois-Rivières. Under the theme, Hunger Comes So Quickly, this year's Grande Guignolée So Food Drive aims to highlight just how close we sometimes are to food insecurity. Job loss, separations, accidents, or illnesses, no one is immune. And since no one is immune, let us all show solidarity and compassion as the festive season approaches. All month long until December 31st, Quebecers can continue to offer donations and foodstuffs. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I encourage everyone to contribute generously to the Grande Quinonée des Médias. Generosity warms the heart, even when it's buried under 6 foot of snow.
The honourable member for Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, 1 in 4 skipping meals, 2 million at food banks. A new report confirms families will have to spend an extra $800 for food thanks to the NDP Liberal carbon tax. And what does the NDP leader do? He sells out Canadians to secure his $2.2 million pension. He's refusing to vote non-confidence in a motion based on his own words. He stated the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Yet here he is once again putting on a show. This sellout leader has voted for the carbon tax 24 times. With friends like the Maserati Marxist, it's no wonder this Prime Minister keeps him around. He doesn't care about workers. He doesn't care about paychecks. He doesn't care about you. End this costly coalition. Put Canadians first and call a carbon tax election. Yeah.
The honourable member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, this week we have learned more about the alleged reports of foreign interference in the Conservative leadership race. All party leaders, the Bloc, the NDP and the Green Party have taken the government up on its offer to get a security clearance. Yet the leader of Conservative Party still refuses to get this security clearance and to access classified documents that would help him protect the party and Canadian from foreign interference. This is not real leadership. Canadians are wondering what the Conservative Party leader has to hide. If he had nothing to hide, he would get the clearance, take the briefing, and protect the country.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
They say weak men create hard times, and this week Prime Minister's inflationary deficits gave Canadians the worst standard of living in over 40 years. The Finance Minister promised one of her fiscal guardrails would not be going over her deficit, which is $40 billion. In fact, the PBO said she blew right past it. Simple question, what's the deficit?
She's not going to be able to answer that.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what my honourable colleague fails to point out is that Canada is projected to have the fastest growing economy in the G7 next year. He fails to point out that we are creating jobs at a near record pace. He doesn't understand that wages are increasing faster than inflation. His strategy for the economy is to make cuts to the programs that are supporting people, cuts to the programs that are building houses. He's opposing, ironically, the tax cut that would deliver relief to families over the holidays. We're going to focus on growing the economy in a way that works for everyone, not the Conservative approach to cut the supports that families need.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
He could have just said he doesn't know, like he doesn't know where the million people he lost went. And even this number-challenged Prime Minister admits every new dollar of his handouts make his inflationary deficits worse. He says he's going to leave the economy to the bankers, that he doesn't think about monetary policy, and he said budgets balance themselves. It's the same incompetence that made Canadians bank broke, building broke, and belly broke. Canadians want to know how broken the Liberal deficit is. What's the number?
Way to go, Jack!
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
My honourable colleague seems to have a penchant for alliteration and personal insults, but what he lacks is an ability to advance policies that will grow the economy or actually help people in need. Mr. Speaker, at every opportunity, they oppose the investments that are creating jobs in this country. They oppose the investments that are building homes in this country, and they oppose the measures that are going to provide tax cuts to middle-class families, to low-income families, to workers in this country. For once, I wish we could have a debate about the issues instead of stooping to these lows where they throw insults instead of advancing policies that help real people.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Here's a common sense policy that common sense Conservatives will bring in when his constituents fire him after the next election. Yeah. We're going to axe the tax for good for everyone. And these deficits that this Prime Minister keeps making sent over 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month, made 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals, and sent 1 in 5 kids into poverty. But the Finance Minister said all of them are just feeling a vibe session. Look, if she's not going to release her economic statement, will she at least tell Canadians how bad she's going to blow through her deficit?
Yeah, way to go, Jeff.
The honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
I'd like to remind that member that the last time that Conservatives were in government, more than 16% of kids were living in poverty, over 1 million children. Since we've come into government, Mr. Speaker, we've lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty through measures like the Canada Child Benefit, supporting families each and every month with up to over $700, through the National School Food Program, now in place in 4 provinces across this country, helping to ensure kids have food at school. Not to mention an HST, GST tax break, Mr. Speaker. We're there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister supported by the Bloc Québécois, this Liberal government is so bad that it's ashamed of its own results. In the last budget, the Minister of Finance predicted a $40 billion deficit, but now we know that the government has added at least $6 billion in inflationary spending to that forecast. But the Prime Minister is ashamed to reveal what the state of the public coffers is. When will the Prime Minister accept our offer to be transparent with Canadians and present the fall economic statement on Monday? Why are they so afraid of letting Canadians know the truth? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Well, speaking of telling Canadians the truth, Mr. Speaker, when we offered a tax break to Canadians over the holidays, a proposal that the leader of the Conservative Party supported a mere 2 years ago, then what did the leader of the official opposition do? He told his MPs to vote against it, regardless of what they actually wanted. Here in Ottawa today, Conservative members are no longer the representatives of their constituents here in Ottawa. On the contrary, they carry the will of their leader back into their ridings.
Sorry,
it's inexcusable. If they really are serious about helping Canadians, they will vote for the tax break. I would invite the Honourable Member for Port-Neuf, Jacques Cartier, to not take the floor, if not allowed by this chair. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, this member ought to be ashamed. The Prime Minister, with the support of the Bloc, keeps spending unaccountably, or without accountability, rather. Meanwhile, families are paying a price for this. According to a Sylvain Charlebois report on food prices, families will have to pay up to $800 more for the groceries in 2025. The Prime Minister thinks that budgets will balance themselves, but he has also said that deficits lead to inflation. He promised to limit the deficit to $40 billion. So will next week's economic statement confirm that he will keep that commitment, or will he cause even more inflation for families? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, my colleague just quoted Sylvain Charlebois on food prices. That same person has said that climate change is the biggest challenge for the agri-food sector. In fact, he just published a report on the impact, the macroeconomic impacts of all this on the agricultural sector. And on page 14, the first part of the report is on climate change. Does it mention the carbon price? No, not at all. That's not even a factor, according to Professor Charlebois. None of this makes any sense. I would just remind the minister to not use documents like this as props. You can quote things, but you can't visibly reference a document. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Well, Mr. Speaker, this will come as a shock to no one, but the Senate is still dragging its feet on Bill C-282 for protecting supply management. For 18 months, our so-called wise men and women in the upper chamber have been looking at this bill, which has a single clause. They've spent 18 months studying a single clause. And yet today they are still postponing a vote on a crucial amendment. They're trying to push it until after the holidays. Will all of the party leaders ask the senators to stop dragging their feet, to have a vote, and to ensure that C-282 is carried before Christmas? The Honourable Government House Leader. As my colleague knows very well, we on this side of the House, we support this bill. The Prime Minister, all of our ministers and caucus have spoken with the senators and are suggesting that they do that work. In fact, the only party leader in this House that we don't know where he stands is the Conservative leader, because we know his caucus is divided on the issue of supply management. But I can assure my honourable colleague that this government fully supports supply management. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Things are not moving quickly enough, Mr. Speaker. It's been 18 months. The senators have still not managed to study a bill with a single clause. It can only mean one of two things. Either they're ready to retire or they're thumbing their nose at us once again. And when I say that, I'm not just speaking of the MPs here in this House. I'm also speaking of all the farmers in Quebec and Canada who are under the supply managed system. That's 90,000 jobs just in Quebec. These people deserve to get an answer before Christmas. On behalf of our farmers, will all the parties ask the senators to get moving before the holidays? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my honourable colleague in the Bloc Québécois, we agree. This is important for farmers. This is important for the supply managed sectors in Quebec and elsewhere in the country. We agree with that bill. We support what the Bloc has done. We support the bill getting through the Senate. Only the Conservatives seem to have issues with this. So I would invite my honourable member for the Bloc Québécois to speak with the Conservative Party to ensure the Conservative senators stop blocking this bill.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. L'honorable député de New Westminster, Burnaby.
Les gens n'en arrachent avec.
Mr. Speaker, people are struggling with the cost of living throughout the country, and a new report shows that a four-person family will pay $800 additional for groceries in 2025. Meanwhile, big grocery chain CEOs are raking in the profits, but the Conservatives don't care at all about the working class. They always want to help their billionaire buddies. Meanwhile, the Liberals could change things if they wanted to. Will they finally stand up against the greed of the big grocery chains? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his excellent question. The NDP has an opportunity to help people during the holidays by helping them have this tax break. We're asking the NDP to work with us to help Canadians so that millions of people will get a tax break over the holidays. They have an opportunity to do that, and I'm asking them to help.
Honourable Member from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Translation, they won't. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are feeling squeezed. A new report says a family of four can expect to pay $800 more in food in 2025. While grocery CEOs are getting richer, workers are scrambling to put food on the table. Liberals let people down. And the Conservatives, they want tax breaks for CEOs, leaving Canadians paying more for everything. Billionaires don't need relief. The working class does. Will the Liberals permanently remove the GST off of life essentials so that families can get a break?
Hear, 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 hear. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
We know that life is expensive, Mr. Speaker, and we want to deliver a break to Canadians. We know that the cost of food has gone too high, which is why we want to remove tax over the holidays. The irony is the Conservatives make the same attack, but they are opposing a tax cut on food for families. Right. Mr. Speaker, I should plan as well the idea that we've got an important stakeholder in Ottawa advocating for a national school food program this week. Her name is Molly. She is an 8-year-old in grade 3 at A.G. Bailey in Nova Scotia, and we're going to provide not only a tax cut on food, but a national school food program so she and her classmates will be able to enjoy a healthy meal every day of the year.
Order. The honourable member for Foothills.
The NDP Liberal Carbon Tax Coalition is delivering Canadians a Christmas nightmare. Canada's Food Price Index report showed that, on average, Canadians will spend $800 more on groceries this year. The Prime Minister's carbon tax is making a dire situation even worse. The number of food bank visits in Toronto are up 1 million people to 3.5 million visits, a 43% increase in new food bank users. Scurvy is on the rise. Food insecurity has surged more than 20%. All Canadians want for Christmas is a carbon tax election. When will this Prime Minister make that Christmas wish come true?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker. The very report that the member opposite...
Order. Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker. The very report that the members opposite cite says that climate change is the greatest driver of food price inflation. It's the same thing Sylvain Charlebois said when he came to committee recently, and the Conservatives have no plan to fight climate change. In addition, we stepped up over the holidays to offer Canadians a GST tax cut. What did the Conservatives do? They opposed. When we step up to help children across Canada get food at school, what do the Conservatives do? They oppose. You want to make Canadians Canadians a Merry Christmas? Step up.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Well, I guess it would take a Festivus miracle to have a serious Prime Minister who understands that when you increase taxes on farmers who grows the food, truckers who move the food, you increase costs of the food. But after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, this is the Christmas list Canadians face. Grocery prices up $800. Price of food inflation is up 36% higher in Canada than the United States. A quarter of Canadians are skipping meals. When will this Prime Minister grant a common-sense Christmas gift to Canadians and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
I would like to quote Marc Lévesque, Chief Security at TD Bank, and he says, I quote, "Okay, enough. This is an outright lie, and I'm not in the habit of calling people liars. The report he's referring to does not mention that the carbon tax is a factor behind the $800 increase, and certainly does not say that carbon tax will cost families $800 more on food." That's coming from the Chief Security Officer at TD Bank, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, let's trust TD Bank. That was just found to be guilty of money laundering.
The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Under this Prime Minister, New Brunswickers continue to struggle and will now have to pay $800 more for food next year. After 9 years, the NDP Liberal carbon tax has caused the price of groceries to skyrocket. According to Food Bank Canada, the number of people accessing food banks increased by 73% the last 2 years. Over 1 million Ontarians are relying on food banks. That's more people that live in my home province. Canadians deserve better. Will the Prime Minister agree that now is the time to call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A reminder that that member and all of the Conservatives have had an opportunity to support the work that we're doing to provide relief to families in New Brunswick and across the country. I look to the National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker. So far, 4 provinces have signed on, meaning over 184,000 kids will receive food at school this school year. More than 1.5 million meals, Mr. Speaker. They could support us with affordability measures should they choose to do what's right, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, not a single plate of food has been served, and 1.4 million Canadian children are living in poverty. The rise in the cost of food is a direct result of the carbon tax. The Prime Minister doesn't understand. If you tax the farmer that grows the food and the trucker that ships it, you end up taxing the family that buys it. Already the NDP Liberal carbon tax has resulted in food prices increasing 36% faster in Canada than across the border. Will the Prime Minister finally give Canadians the carbon tax election now?
Although the chair couldn't quite make out the words, he did hear some people intervening from the far end of the chamber. It is really important, and this was brought up this morning in different meetings, but it's really important for members not to speak while other members are talking, for no other reason than the respect that we could have for our members who use the translation devices so that they can hear what's going on in the House. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just because a Conservative member of Parliament makes something up doesn't mean that it's true. The Minister of the Environment has quoted the actual report that says specifically that the price on pollution is not responsible for the increase in food prices. But if the Conservatives were honest with Canadians and wanted to actually do something to help them with the high cost of food over the holidays, they could support our GST tax break for Canadians that is taking the GST off of essential items, including groceries, Mr. Speaker. If they were honest with Canadians, they would support the school food program that is feeding 184,000 kids. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The carbon tax doesn't affect the price of food.
The honourable member from Abbotsford, I'm just going to ask him, please, not to take the floor unless recognised by the House so that everybody can participate.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, you know, we have this beautiful tradition in Canada. Children who write letters to Father Christmas. But this year, we've learned that Santa has never received so many letters from kids who are not asking for toys, but instead are asking Santa for food, scarves, winter coats and gloves. That's what children are asking for after 9 years of this Liberal government. A $500 billion deficit from this government. Are they really proud of their record? The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Labour. Well, Mr. Speaker, I am left speechless by what my colleague says when he just voted against the GST break. Coats, mittens, children's clothes, and many other things like prepared foods and restaurants would all benefit from that. And so this member voted against that, and believe it or not, he also is against school food programs. He doesn't want to fund breakfasts and lunches in schools. It's unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, I am against a 10-cent break on a bag of chips. What a huge difference. Well, real talk, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years of this government, 2 million Canadians are having to go to food banks. And food prices are going to go up by $800 next year due to this government's inflationary policies. After 9 years of this inflationary government with the support of the Bloc Québécois, is this government really proud of its economic record?
L'honorable ministre du Travail et des Aînés.
The Honourable Minister. Well, we are proud of the low rate of unemployment in Quebec, our record levels of foreign investment. This is a leading country on the world stage. And yet, what does the member across the way say when we're offering a tax break on things like toys, Christmas trees, children's clothes, restaurant meals? Well, this member got up and voted against it. He keeps talking about affordability, but he voted against it. It's unbelievable. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, things are getting serious for Lyon Électrique, and the Prime Minister should keep his promises. In 2021, the Prime Minister personally went to the Lyon Électrique factory to announce billions of dollars in the Zero Emission Transit Fund. And the Prime Minister told the company to get ready to be snowed under by orders for buses from the rest of Canada, but that never happened. Why? Because the federal government refused to grant the full sums that it had said it would give in subsidies to potential buyers. So will the Prime Minister finally keep his promise and unblock the funds? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for the Bloc Québécois for his question. Lyon Électrique is indeed an extremely important business when it comes to transit electrification, not just in Quebec, but elsewhere in Canada as well. And the federal program will enable municipalities to buy hundreds of electric buses. Thanks to that program, Mr. Speaker, unlike what my colleague for the Bloc Québécois and for the Conservative Party, what my colleagues have said. Order, please.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. L'honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
The honourable member. Well, this is talking about the future, and the future is too late. The Prime Minister didn't just make this promise to Lyon Électrique. He also made promises to their workers, including the 400 who just got laid off right before the holidays. But at the time, the company took the Prime Minister at his word, and they opened a second battery factory in Mirabel. They hired people. They bought supplies. But then in the end, they are not getting orders because the federal government has not provided the funds it promised to potential buyers. The Prime Minister has had a role to play in the difficulties facing the company. So he needs to personally take action. Will he?
To the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we know where the puck is going in the world economy, which is towards the clean economy of the future. Our government has been working hard to attract billions of dollars of investment to secure good-paying jobs for generations to come. That's precisely the work we've been doing. We know Lion Electric is a leader in electric buses and electric trucks in this country, and we'll make every effort to work with them to get projects across the finish line. This situation is being monitored closely, and we know how important it is to Quebec and the Government of Canada.
L'honorable député de Pierre.
The honourable member for Pierre Boucher-les-Patriotes-Verchères. Mr. Speaker, we know that the transit sector is going to have a green pivot. That includes school transit. It's completely inevitable that this is going to happen. But the real question is, when we do buy these electric buses, are we going to be buying Quebec buses built by Quebecers, or will we buy American buses built by Americans?
That's all you wanted to talk about?
Because Ottawa once again showed a lack of vision and abandoned this flagship company. Will this government finally wake up and unblock all of the money in the Zero Transit Emission Fund?
Buddy, fix your tie.
L'honorable ministre du Logement.
The Honourable Minister of Housing. Mr. Speaker, through the Zero Emission Transit Fund, the federal government will be helping school bus and transit operators to electrify their transit fleet. This is essential. We need to invest to support this pivot in our economy in order to seize opportunities to build the green economy. I have spoken with my counterparts in Quebec in order to identify solutions, and we will continue to make all necessary investments to strengthen the green economy throughout the country, including in Quebec.
The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, as we approach Christmas, there is no joy. A recent study shows that more than 21% of Nova Scotia households were food insecure in 2022, which is a 17% year-over-year increase. And about 1/5 of those people who are food insecure seek help through services like food banks. As a result, food bank use in Nova Scotia has skyrocketed. Food bank leaders say it's a perfect storm between the rising cost of living, unaffordable housing, and inadequate income. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election today so that Nova Scotians can feed themselves with dignity?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Food insecurity is a very serious issue, including in my home province of Nova Scotia. But, Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take seriously the question from the Conservative Party members when they are literally opposing a tax cut on food. This holiday season, we are putting a GST holiday in place to reduce the cost of food that people buy, including when they go out to eat at restaurants, including products that are not exempt at grocery stores. Mr. Speaker, I hope the honourable member will put his money where his mouth is and for once support a measure that is going to deliver meaningful financial relief to families in need.
You can shove your 2-month
The honourable
tax
member
break.
from Cumberland Colchester.
Well, Speaker, I suggest that that member opposite go to the grocery store now again, because essentials, grocery essentials, are already GST exempt, and the temporary tax trickery on foods such as sugary and salty foods and coated candy, popcorn, beer, and ready-to-drink alcoholic drinks are certainly not going to help food insecurity on behalf of any Canadians. And we continue to see that accessing food banks has increased 73%, and now more than 1 million Ontarians are visiting food banks, which is 6 times the population of Prince Edward Island. Canadians need relief. Will they have a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
It is absolutely clear my honourable colleague was not listening to the answer to his first question before he delivered his second. I said specifically that we are exempting tax on food that is not already exempted from the GST, including food that people may purchase at a restaurant. Mr. Speaker, what's interesting is the Conservatives are opposed not just to the tax cut on holiday gifts, toys for kids, clothing for kids, diapers, car seats, and food. They oppose the measures we put in place to reduce the cost of living when we cut taxes for the middle class, when we stop sending child care checks to millionaires so we can put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families. They just don't care about people. It's all politics.
You think people who are food insecure can afford to go to a restaurant?
The Honourable Order.
It's so backwards.
The Honourable Member from Regina Leuven.
Obviously, that minister hasn't been to a grocery store in a while. The NDP Liberals quadrupling of the carbon tax will cost Saskatchewan people $2,000 a year. Now, the latest food price report shows Canadians are being forced to buy less nutritious food because of the higher prices. This is Canada under that Prime Minister. To make matters worse, the average family will spend $800 additionally on groceries next year. Will these NDP Liberals finally do the right thing and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide between their plan to tax everything and our plan to axe the carbon tax on everything for everyone?
Forever. Order. Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this feigned sympathy, these crocodile tears on behalf of the Conservatives is fooling no Canadian. When the Conservatives had the opportunity to support measures that would help Canadians, measures like cutting their taxes, Mr. Speaker, they opposed. When we proposed a school food program that's going to help feed thousands of children across the country in their schools, Mr. Speaker, they opposed. Every time we try and help Canadians, Conservatives stand up and oppose that help, Mr. Speaker. Let us be clear. This Conservative leader does not have the interests of Canadians at heart.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Parents are struggling to get their children the health care they need. 5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor and are relying on emergency rooms to get care. And ER visits are even higher for kids. A new report shows that 1 in 7 ER visits could have been treated in primary care. Liberals and Conservatives before them cut healthcare transfers, and it's led to this crisis. Why are the Liberals doing so little for Canadians for them to get the care they need?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. Canadians deserve good public health care across the country. That is why we as a government support publicly funded healthcare system. That is why we're making unprecedented investment in our healthcare system. $290 billion over 10 years across the country to every province and territory, with the sole purpose of ensuring that primary healthcare is available to all Canadians across this country. And we urge our provinces to take action to make sure that there are more doctors and nurses available in all those communities by using the federal dollars that have been transferred to them. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, everyone across Canada is feeling the high cost of living, and that's especially true for people living in the remote communities on Haida Gwaii, who are isolated from the mainland by a 7-hour ferry ride. Now there is a tax deduction that is meant to help people in remote communities afford the high cost of living. But 30 years ago, it was a Liberal government that cut Haida Gwaii's access in half. Now, they've been fighting to get it back ever since. And so my question is, will this Liberal government do the right thing and restore the full Northern residents tax deduction for the good people of Haida Gwaii?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question, a very important question. We've been working since day one on affordability issues for all people of the North and isolated communities. We've brought in a tax cut for groceries, for diapers, for essential items last week. The Conservatives voted against it. We brought in a national school food program, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives voted against it. There's more to do, but we'll get it done with partners.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the government announced their intention to split the Online Harms Act into two parts, to move quickly, to act now, and to advance child protection measures. We've lost too much time because of the Conservative stalling tactics. I find it unconscionable that the Conservatives are opposed to forcing the removal of child sexual abuse material from the internet. Can the Minister of Justice explain why the updated Bill C-63 is essential for the safety of Canadians, especially our kids?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Auditor Attorney General.
Everything in my power to protect children. That is what splitting this bill is about. At committee this morning, Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda, said, quote, "I've waited 12 years for this because on day one of Amanda's death, I knew that things needed to change in terms of law, legislation, and online safety. I can't bring my child back, but we can certainly keep other children safe." Mr. Speaker, parents need our help. Children need our help. Bill C-63 is about protecting kids and saving lives. Every party in this chamber has a vested interest in doing just that. Will everyone find the courage to back this bill?
There's every single social media.
The Honourable Member for Kildonans.
Privacy protection and a
Mr.
child
Speaker, last week the people of Toronto were shocked to see a man attempt a violent carjacking, shooting up cars all over the 401. And it's not just Toronto. Gun violence is up 116% under this Liberal government. In fact, it's the 9th consecutive year that gun violence has increased in this country. And what are the Liberals doing today, Mr. Speaker? Another announcement, but not targeting the criminals on the 401. No, targeting turkey hunters and sport shooters and trained, tested and vetted law-abiding Canadians. When are they going to realize that gun violence is only going to stop when they go after the criminals responsible for gun violence?
Well said. Well said.
Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's quite shameful on the anniversary of one of the largest mass shootings targeting women in this country. The Conservatives seem to be more concerned about keeping guns on the street that are designed for the battlefield. Mr. Speaker, we are not going after hunters or sport shooters. What we're doing is we're protecting our communities. In particular, we're protecting women who are disproportionately victims of gun violence. While Conservatives work for the gun lobby, we serve Canadians in keeping them safe.
I can even ask the Toronto police. The guns on the street are all illegal that are being used to shoot people.
Order.
There's no person going and getting their pal and then shooting on the street.
The Honourable Member for Kildonans, St. Paul.
This Liberal government has no credibility when it comes to protecting women. In the 9 years they've been in power, sexual assaults have have increased 75%. 94 municipalities and the province of Nova Scotia have declared intimate partner violence as an epidemic. In Canada, Mr. Speaker, one woman in Peel region is strangled to death every single day, and violent abusers of women are getting let out on bail easier than ever because of the Liberal Bill C-75. There's only one party in this place that's going to protect women from the monsters who abuse them, that's going to put criminals of gun violence behind bars, and that's the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. Win for the get an election.
Here, here.
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, our track record on protecting people from violence, on guns...
It's awful. It's awful.
Colleagues, I cannot even hear the answer. Please, I'm going to ask you to restrain yourselves while we hear the answer.
Colleagues.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General, from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, our track record on protecting women from violence, from violent firearms, speaks for itself with respect to assault rifles, with respect to handguns. What I find actually quite appalling is that party's ability to stand up and talk about what women want in this chamber. Because when today, Barbara Lavers at the Justice Committee said on Bill C-63, we must work together as communities, families and governments to reduce the online abuse of our children. Social media platforms must be held accountable. They must help keep our children safe. Children like Harry are dying. Her son is dead because of online safety issues that party opposes. That's unconscionable.
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Member from Kildonan and St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, at the Status of Women Committee, we hear from abused woman after abused woman who have been hurt and their lives endangered because of Bill C-75. Their abusers are getting out on bail easier than ever before.
I'm sorry. I'm having some difficulty hearing the Honourable Member. The Honourable Member from Kildonan and St. Paul, from the top, please.
The statistics on women speak for themselves. 75% increase of sexual assaults. 75% increase since they've been in power. Sexual violations against children up 120%. And why is this? We've heard from Status of Women Committee over and over from abused women. It's Bill C-75. These monsters are getting out on bail and killing women. That's on this Liberal government, no matter what they say. Their announcement today will not protect a single woman in this country, Mr. Speaker. When are they going to call an election so that Conservatives can get in power and do something about it?
You know what the other thing too is? A lot of people from other countries that we bring in predominantly, I don't want to say specifically, but the age of consent is lower in their countries. So when they come here, they think they can do that here.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, we're listening to women, we're listening to mothers. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection put out a promotional video about our work to combat online harms. They had the mother of Rehtaeh Parsons, the mother of Amanda Todd, the mother of Harry Burke, whom I just quoted. All three of these women share one thing in common. They desperately want this Parliament to keep Canadian children safe. We have a proposal to do exactly that by taking child pornography and child sex abuse material off of the internet. Surely, for the love of God, 338 people can agree on that priority.
Order.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we are ending the days of action against violence against women on a very bad note. In May 2020, this government unilaterally banned the use of legally obtained firearms by law-abiding citizens. In November 2022, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, they banned hunting weapons. While they go after honest citizens, gun violence has increased by 116% over the last 9 years. Illegal weapons are flowing freely across the border, and criminals are using them with impunity. Will this government please leave sports shooters and hunters alone and go after criminals?
The
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we have taken concrete action to remove from circulation war weapons, which were designed for the battlefield, Mr. Speaker. We are taking action against assault weapons that do not belong in our community, Mr. Speaker. I find that shameful. It's the 35th anniversary of the Polytechnique shooting. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are standing up and repeating the falsehoods by the firearms lobby. The Honourable Member for Drummond. On Tuesday, Quebec's National Assembly made me very proud to be a Quebecer when it unanimously supported a motion denouncing hate speech and calling for an end to the religious exemption. Calling for someone's death in the name of God should not be more lawful or legitimate than calling for someone's death because you don't like them. Freedom of religion is not a license to propagate hatred, Mr. Speaker. If a religion is misogynistic or homophobic, then that's the problem, not women's and homosexuals. Why did the Liberals reject the motion to denounce the religious exemption, even though the motion was similar to the one passed unanimously on that same day by the National Assembly of Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are aware of the fact that hatred is rising in our communities and that there is an increase in anti-Semitism everywhere in Canada at the moment. The Bloc Québécois suggestion is a good one. We want to study it in depth. What I would like to underscore is what I've said many times before, which is that we already have in this place on the table legislation to combat hatred in Canada. That is Bill C-63. If they want to support that legislation, that would help all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Drummond. I barely got through a sentence of the motion yesterday when some members started shouting no. I only had time to say that the House of Commons declare that hate speech is not tolerable, and already the Liberals were saying no. There are people in this House who have no problem tolerating hate. People can say, go God, kill all those miscreants. If we put it in God's hands, it becomes perfectly acceptable to make threats and spread hatred, according to the Liberals. The Liberal Justice Minister says he wants to ban hate speech. Well, how does he feel about Liberal MPs insisting that death threats should be legal as long as they are made in the name of God? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, hatred is on the rise, and it's up 130% as compared to a few years ago. All Canadians and Quebecers are experiencing this. We do wish to discuss the Bloc Québécois bill. We're very willing to debate it, but we already have C-63, which actually relates to the same criminal code section as the Bloc Québécois motion and bill. For instance, it would increase punishment for hatred and those who incite hatred. So we need to do this work all together.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
It was just reported in Vancouver that 2 people were wounded in another random stabbing. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, these tragic stories are sadly more common as violent crime is up 50%. NDP Liberals' soft-on-crime policies and laws have unleashed a crime wave across Canada, including random attacks. Bill C-75 created a catch-and-release bail system. Bill C-5 removed mandatory minimum sentences on many serious crimes. Will the Liberal government reverse these reckless policies?
The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-75 codified existing Supreme Court jurisprudence and added a tougher decision on bail for those who target women. That's the fact. Let's talk about the actual combat against crime. Let's talk about crimes against children. Mr. Speaker, you cannot make this up. What the Leader of the Opposition has said, what his Justice critic has reiterated, is that no matter what progress we make with the help of the Bloc Québécois and the NDP on taking down child pornography off the internet, they will reverse it. That is morally bankrupt as a policy and incredulous to assert in this chamber. The combat against crime includes combat against child sex predators.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that was just a desperate and untrue response. And after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, Canadians Canadians don't even feel safe walking down the street, taking public transit, or even being in their own homes. Canadians want repeat violent offenders to remain behind bars and mandatory jail time for serious violent crimes. Small businesses have had it with the crime and the extra costs. Even every Canadian premier called on the Liberals to scrap the catch and release bail policies. So will the Liberals listen and reverse the reckless crime policies, or can they just get out of the way so a Conservative government can fix what they broke?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the facts. The facts, as reported by CTV, are that the Conservative leader has vowed to repeal the legislation entirely should it become law. Yesterday, the Conservative justice critic indicated that it is exactly that. They would repeal online regulation bills passed by the Liberal government. You know, Mr. Speaker, that might deter some people. It sure as heck is not going to deter me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep Canadians safe. That means Canadian moms, Canadian children, and if I do that with my party's help, with the Bloc Québécois' help, and the NDP's help, so be it. I will do it over the opposition to the Conservatives because their position is bankrupt morally and endangers our kids.
Yeah, this guy's losing it.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Durham.
After a home invasion in Oakville, the Halton police chief said, "Yet another violent offender already out on similar and violent charges with court conditions on him. Anyone surprised that some of these violent criminals reoffend?" Mr. Speaker, I know someone who might be surprised. The Liberal Minister of Justice. Wow. Tragic and appalling. He thinks he knows more than police officers do in our country. Shameful. So the question is, when will this Liberal government listen to police across Canada and stop violent criminals?
Great question. Great.
I invite the Honourable Member for Ottawa Centre, please, not to take the floor when not recognized by the Chair. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Here's an example of a few police officers that I'm listening to, Mr. Speaker. Deputy Chief in Vaughan, Alvaro Almeida, has said specifically that without investments in resources like courts and Crown attorneys, we can't actually keep the bad guys in jail. The National Police Federation, or police officers that I'm also listening to, what they've said is that it's interesting that in order to be appointed as a JP that decides bail in Nova Scotia, you have to have legal training before getting that appointment. That is not the case throughout the country, certainly not in the case in the province of Ontario that I call home. That's an issue that needs to be addressed because we all have a vested interest in keeping people safe.
Again, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member, who's a new member from Durham, not to take the floor, especially after I asked a question. It's important for us to hear the response. L'honorable député de Sudbury.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, our government is implementing a tax holiday for all Canadians effective December 14th. This is a move by our government to help Canadians celebrate during the holidays without additional costs. And this will be real savings on children's clothing, food, and many other essential items. But the Conservatives voted against our tax holiday. Could the Minister explain how this government will help Canadians financially and give them a bit of relief during the holiday time?
L'honorable Minister.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and for the Quebec Economic Development Agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, what is the Conservative leader doing for people? To give them a tax holiday? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's a movie everyone watches during the holiday season, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Well, that's happening right here, Mr. Speaker. The movie, though, has a happy ending. The Grinch's heart gets bigger, but the Conservative leader's heart is not getting bigger. He just doesn't want to help Quebec and Quebec families buy toys, diapers, or groceries. Mr. Speaker, Canadians can definitely not trust or have confidence in the Conservative Party's leader.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 8 months since fiscal year end. How are we supposed to vote on billions in spending and taxation without the deficit number? Speculation is that the government has blown through its deficit anchor, its fiscal anchor, despite the finance minister promising that, quote, "This is our fiscal anchor, a line we shall not cross, and that will ensure our finances remain sustainable so long as it remains unbreached." So what's the deficit? How big is the breach, and how unsustainable are federal fiscal finances?
Wow.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Prime Minister, Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have the lowest deficit of all of our G7 peers. We also have the lowest debt to GDP ratio. And it will be our pleasure to present a fall economic statement so that all Canadians can see what the books look like, include the Conservative Party. But, Mr. Speaker, we also need to support Canadians. We also need to have affordability measures. And that's why we're cutting taxes for Canadians. We're giving Canadians a tax break. And the Conservatives have no explanation for why they want to deny Canadians a tax holiday.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, here's what Stephen Paulus, the past governor of the Bank of Canada, said just 2 days ago. I would say we're in a recession. I wouldn't even call it a technical one.
Wow.
The past governor says we're in a recession. The current deputy governor of the bank says it's an emergency. So when will the government start listening to the experts and understand that its policies on its budgets, its spending, and its deficits, whatever the number is, have caused a recession and an economic emergency?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
I have to say, I am quite disappointed in the Conservative member opposite. He should know what the definition of a recession is. We haven't even had a single quarter of negative growth. In fact, Statistics Canada has just revised our growth numbers upwards for the last 3 years. They would like to quote former governors of the Bank of Canada. I've got one. David Dodge just said that because the Conservative Party was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit between 2011 and 2015, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower, rather more muted recovery.
Hear, hear.
This Liberal government has ensured a very strong recovery, the strongest in the G7.
The honourable member for Calgary Midnapore.
After 9 years of broken fiscal promises, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister has zero credibility. He promised that the budget would balance itself. His Finance Minister promised that the 2023 deficit would not exceed $40 billion. Now, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has told us that this Liberal government has shattered through their $40 billion deficit promise by $7 billion. So I have one question for the Prime Minister. What is the deficit?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Speaker, what we hear on the other side of the House is not resonating with Canadians. The reason being because Canadians, in their time of need, require a government that recognizes that their supports for dental care, supports for pharmacare, supports for a national school food program, supports for the most vulnerable in our economy are ones that the Conservatives ignore. They vote against every single time, Mr. Speaker, and on this side of the House, we will always be there to support Canadians in their time of need.
That was laughable.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, the government is introducing a 2-month tax break for all Canadians. Starting December 14th, we're taking the GST off children's clothing and diapers, as well as prepared foods and restaurant meals. You would think that after all their preaching about cutting taxes, the Conservatives would walk the walk and support this measure. But they voted against it. Why won't they axe this tax? Can the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure tell us why axing this tax on the middle class is important for all Canadians? Merry Christmas, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
That's right, Mr. Speaker. Despite positioning themselves in a contrary way, these guys are all tax and no axe. They're literally opposing a tax cut on the essentials over the holidays. We're talking about food, about clothes, about diapers, about car seats, about snowsuits for kids. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that they want to cut is the programs that are delivering real support to Canadians. They want to cut the programs that are helping get homes built across this country. They want to cut the programs that are actually delivering meaningful change to the environment in this country. They will not stand up for working families. They've had the chance, and they said no.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Alberta has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. And yet we have documents showing that Premier Daniel Smith is organizing a secret mission to bring over cheap labour from the United Arab Emirates, of all places. This is at the same time that the UCP state they find it, quote, disgusting that workers from other parts of Canada are working in the oil patch. Now, Liberals and Conservatives have allowed big CEOs to drive down wages and exploit foreign workers while leaving Albertans who need jobs left behind. So to the Minister for Workplace Development, will she stand up to Daniel Smith and defend the jobs of Alberta workers? Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Veterans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government's priority is to offer Canadians good jobs, good, well-paying jobs. We prioritize Canadian workers. We are aware of workers' business needs, and that's why we have made changes to the temporary foreign worker program so that we can meet the needs of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we are always there to support Canadian workers. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, affordable housing dollars should go towards building truly affordable homes. Yet that's not the case most of the time. All because CMHC doesn't use any affordability criteria for the majority of units they fund, and even when they do, they rarely use their own definition of affordable housing. It's why I've introduced a motion that follows the calls of housing experts like Dr. Caroline Weitzman to require income-based definitions across all affordable housing programs. Will the minister listen to these experts and take up this important call?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great respect for my honourable colleague, as I do Dr. Weitzman, who I've had the opportunity to benefit from on a number of occasions when it comes to receiving her advice. The majority of our grant programs that deliver cash subsidies to affordable housing projects are designed to support social housing, nonprofit housing, housing for low-income families. We do have a range of other programs, including financing, that delivers market-based housing with certain affordability criteria to make sure we can build more middle-class homes as well. I look forward to continuing to work with that member and other members of this House who want to advance these important conversations and get more homes built, including in places like Kitchener. Thank you.
And so we come to an end of question period today. I see that there are some members who are rising on a point of order. The honourable member from Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion.
No.
That notwithstanding any standing...
No.
So I'm afraid I'm not hearing...
I want to watch earlier. This is Pierre in the House when he was tabling his he already tabled his motion, but he spoke to it.
Agrees with the NDP leader that the House proclaims it has lost the confidence in the Prime Minister.
This was like an hour before question period.
For the Honourable Leader of the official opposition.
Today in a spirit of non-partisanship, to put our differences aside and take a good idea and a good perspective, no matter where it comes from. You know, too often in this place, we refuse to accept ideas or input from other people. And so I thought I would remedy that by taking the words and the message of the leader of the NDP, putting them in a conservative motion so that all of us could vote for the very wise things that he said. So allow me, in the spirit of this nonpartisan spirit, to read off the motion that we have here. Common sense conservative motion, whereas the leader of the NDP said he has ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government, whereas the NDP leader said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people, whereas the NDP leader said the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power. And he said that in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referral to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters Canada Rail Conference and the ILWU 514 to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. Therefore, the House agrees with the NDP leader, and the House proclaims that it has lost confidence in the Prime Minister and the government. applaud the NDP leader. I know that he is enjoying the praise we're giving him. So let's go through point by point, as I know the member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry will take up as I'm splitting my time with him. But let's go through point by point to prove the charge of the leader. He says the Liberals are too weak. Well, he's right about that. The economy is weak, having lost $500 billion of net investment out to the United States, having shrunk the last 8 quarters in a row on a per capita basis, having seen the productivity per hour worked in Canada drop for 6 quarters in a row. Our economy is now smaller than it was 10 years ago, and we've gone from having median incomes equal to American median incomes to the present, where the American worker makes $22,000 more. Our economy is shrinking in per capita terms. The cost of living is out of reach. We have 2 million people lined up at food banks. We have double the housing costs, the worst housing price inflation in the G7. Vancouver and Toronto are the most expensive housing markets on planet Earth, in all of North America. And so we recognize that economically, the Liberals have made the country weak. And then there's politically weak. Right. And this Prime Minister has lost the support not only of Canadians, who overwhelmingly want to fire him, but of his own party. In fact, the Liberal leader in Ontario has said that his carbon tax is wrong. Right. How could she not say that? It will quadruple over the next 5 years, bringing economic nuclear winter to our country, emptying our shelves of groceries, driving even more people into starvation. Then the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland has said that the Prime Minister's energy cap will kill jobs in that province. And then 20 Liberal MPs want to fire him. But it's also gone to his own cabinet, right in the middle of a potential trade dispute with incoming President Trump. You would assume that the foreign minister of all ministers, if she were to appear in the New York Times, would be doing so to fight against the tariffs. But instead, she was in the New York Times with the following headline: New York Times tapped by the Prime Minister to steer foreign affairs. She's now his possible successor. That is the foreign minister.
Nice way he held that paper.
Point of order from the Deputy House Leader.
He's not even remotely good at what he's trying to do. He's trying to use a prop, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call?
No. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, I'll just remind him to keep that down.
Mr. Speaker, for him to dismiss the foreign minister in that way is outrageous. The reality is she's the one who chose to go to a photo shoot in a studio with the New York Times in an article about how she is the possible successor to her own boss. So you would expect a foreign minister, of all ministers, would be busy fighting tariffs with our biggest trading partner. Instead, she's fighting to replace her boss. On penserait qu'une...
You might think that a Minister of Foreign Affairs would be working hard to prevent tariffs. But instead, she went to the New York Times for a long article which spoke of her as a possible replacement to her leader. That shows weakness.
Right. The leader, the Liberal Prime Minister, is weak. Is he selfish? Well, Mr. Speaker, what else could you call it? When he's treated himself to illegal vacations to private islands, when he's lavished himself with constant gifts and benefits, when he's shut down Parliament numerous times to cover up scandals, while he's refusing to allow Canadians to see, to have accountability for the $400 million missing dollars in the Green Slush Fund scandal, and while he protects his own trust fund from the tax increases he imposes on everyone else, one can only think that this is selfish. And while, most of all, he stays in power, even seeing the devastating consequences this is having on the lives of everyday Canadians, that is nothing if not selfish. And then we move to the charge that the NDP leader makes, that the Prime Minister is attacking the rights of workers. Mr. Speaker, of this there is no doubt. We see the leader of the NDP. He's gone to rallies at places where courageous workers are striking in order to recuperate many of the lost wages that have resulted from government-induced inflation. Exactly. We know we had more strikes last year than in any year since 1983, a 40-year high. We have, of course, Canada Post workers on strike, doing that strike now lasting a long time and doing incredible damage to small business. Hopefully it will come to an end soon. But the NDP leader showed up at these strikes and said, and I quote, "If there is any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, we are going to vote no. I can tell you right now, we'll vote no, whether that vote is a confidence vote or not, whether that vote triggers an election or not. I'm telling the Prime Minister and the Liberals right now, you're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of workers. Never," he said, Mr. Speaker. What a powerful statement. Never, and absolutely categorical. So surely he would vote on this motion, keeping his word to those workers, or was he looking them straight in the eye and telling them a plain falsehood? Will he go back to them after this vote and tell them that when it came down to putting his vote where his words was, he just didn't have the courage, that he was under too much pressure, that the fear of losing an election and facing the voters and facing the music for his own record was too much for him, and therefore he backed down and he turned his back on those workers and left them out in the cold? Is that what he's going to tell those union workers, Mr. Speaker? Right. And if so, how will they ever believe anything he says to them again? Right. The answer is that they, of course, could not. But if the NDP leader does decide to vote against his own words, it will mean two things. One, that he does not want to take responsibility for his own record. He doesn't want voters to have the ability to judge his record and his plans because he fears that they will render a verdict that is not in his favor. The second thing it will reveal is that in the next election, there are not 5 parties running, there are not 4 parties running, there are 2 parties running. That's right. There is the NDP Bloc Liberal coalition that tax your food, punish your work, double your housing cost, unleash crime and chaos in your community, or common sense conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. That is the choice. That's right. It is a binary choice. You vote for the NDP, you get the Liberals. You vote for the Liberals, you get the NDP. You vote for the Bloc, you get both the NDP and the Liberals. And if you are among the grand majority of Canadians who is unsatisfied with the downward spiral of our country, with the broken borders, broken immigration system, broken economy, if you want to bring home Canada's promise again and restore a country where hard work earns a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food and homes in safe neighborhoods, where anyone from anywhere can do anything in the freest nation on earth, in Canada, here. Then let's bring it home. Here, here.
Here, here. Well said. Well said.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Look, in this House and in other public settings, there's been a member of Parliament, I'll let the leader guess which one, but that member's been here for about 20 years, has a big pension, and I want to give him a couple of quotes and perhaps he could comment on them. One, unions have the power to shut down a workplace. Legal powers give the union a state-enforced monopoly on labor. This member spoke of, quote, fattened union contracts. Wow. This member allowed right-to-work legislation, that's optional union membership, in his party's platform. And that member cannot, quote, comprehend that union firms can be competitive with non-union ones. I wonder if that member of Parliament could explain those comments that he's made about working people in this country.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the member can distort my record instead of defending his own. He is a part of the government. This former corporate lobbyist and party staffer who spent his time making money off the political system can explain why he and his government have presided over the largest number of strikes in the last 40 years of Canadian history. Never have there been more strikes than since 1983, and they have consistently, Liberals, with the help of the NDP, have overpowered the rights of workers to carry out those strikes and used their legal authority to rob workers of their autonomy and their independent decision-making, Mr. Speaker. That is their record. And by the way, it is the first time in our history that people with good union jobs cannot afford homes. Right. It is the first time in history that en masse union workers are lined up at food banks. Mr. Speaker, that is the tragic record of this broken government. That's why we need a common-sense Conservative government will bring home the country we knew and loved.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable député de Jonquière.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, I won't try to hide the fact that sometimes I struggle to follow the leader of the official opposition. He often has said that teachers were stepping down because there was no more heating in schools, or that nurses were leaving their jobs because of a lack of heating in their hospitals. But he's never proposed any solutions. And thinking back to what he said not long ago, he said that electricians can seize lightning in their hands and use that to wire a house. Wouldn't they be able to use these extraordinary skills to heat hospitals and schools then? The honourable leader of the opposition. Yes, electricians would be capable of providing heating in schools and in hospitals. And electricians do have exceptional skills, thanks to their experience and other good qualities, and I admire that, which is why I use this poetic metaphor to describe people working in the skilled trades. And I think the fact that I use this poetic language shows once again that the Conservative Party loves the arts, and I would be happy to use further poetic language to help the Bloc Québécois understand common sense and to understand our solutions, which includes axing the taxes that force provinces to fire nurses and teachers in order to be able to pay the heating bills. We will axe those taxes and we will support nurses and teachers.
And comments, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Hamilton Centre, Mr.
Sorry, Hamilton Centre.
That's okay. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Conservative Party would be laughable if his hypocrisy wasn't so ridiculous. He stood up right now in his opening remarks and exposed himself. This man has never been to a picket line. He called it a rally for striking workers. This leader fought aggressively against card check legislation. He was one of the loudest supporters of the anti-union Bill C-377. He also is proudly one of the loudest proponents of the U.S. right-to-work legislation. So my question is simple. Despite all of his cosplay, we've seen he can't even put on a high-vis vest. Has this member ever once in his life actually visited a picket line?
We are almost out of time. Allow the honourable leader of the opposition to answer.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.
Nothing else needed to be said.
Reprise du débat. The honourable member for Starmount, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's always an
Okay, so we watched this part now. We already saw this earlier. So that's where we left off. It was about 20 minutes that we missed before I started because I was a little bit late today, which I apologize for. And I also apologize for not covering committee this morning. So that's why we're going to watch it in about 10 minutes. I've put the link here in chat. It's right there. So we're going to be watching Randy from this morning. If you guys missed it, I do apologize that I didn't cover it live. That's one oversight. I usually do catch all the committees the night before. So again, my apologies. Do appreciate everybody tuning in for question period today. You guys know we don't go live tomorrow because it's Fridays. But we are going to go ahead and switch over to that link in about 7 minutes. We're going to go watch Randy from committee this morning, which was apparently really good. So if you did already see it, obviously you don't have to rejoin us. But for anybody that did miss it, it's pretty good to see Garnett and Barrett roast Randy Boissonneau. So yeah, let's go ahead and I'm going to take 7 minutes here off. wash up, and then I'm going to see you guys on that link. There's the link again. I think we had Jody do. It was Lori B. Lori B, appreciate your super chats always. Thank you for supporting the channel. And thank everybody for watching and subscribing. And I'll see you guys in 7 minutes. Let's go watch that committee if you missed it. It's going to be pretty good. So, cheers, guys.